for a few seconds while we wait for all the participants. Thanks.
Hey, Jessie. Just saw an old friend of mine on there, Jessie Lawrence. Cool stuff. I have to say, you're very well positioned between you two books.
Well, that's just where my desk is because it faces a wall. So it's, yeah.
The mess that is
it's not a freestanding one, if you know what I mean.
Cool.
Right, I think we're good to go. So welcome everyone to this shorted out session with Farah Abushwesha. My name's Hannah Patterson. And Short It Out is brought to you by Encounters Film Festival, BFI Network and Watershed as part of Depict 2020, and the events are supported by BAFTA and Channel 4. Please do put your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom throughout the session and we'll get to them as and when. So just to introduce Farah. Hello, Farah.
Hello.
Hello. Farah is a BAFTA-nominated producer. She's worked across short films, across features and TV series, most recently the ABC Murders and the forthcoming The Singapore Grip. She also founded and runs the Rocliffe New Writing Showcase, which we'll come back to talk about in more detail. And she's written 2 industry guides, a professional approach for screenwriters and writer-directors, and a guide to low-budget filmmaking. So we are going to discuss making work on a low budget and how to approach your work, particularly right now during the lockdown situation. So Farah, maybe you could just introduce us to how you got into the industry initially.
Yeah, my route came through drama school. So I went to drama school. I came out of, I graduated with an agent. I found it really hard to find sort of parts for sort of actresses, you know, in your early 20s. They were either always the girlfriend or just really not very interesting. And as a result, set up Rocliffe, which is now the BAFTA Rocliffe initiative. And it was a way to get meeting other sort of directors, writers, actors, producers. And it kind of just grew and grew and grew. And it was really interesting. It was the start of shooting people as well. So this kind of network, this online network had just sort of started. And it was a real change in people communicating. And it felt less of a kind of a mystery to me. Because I think, you know, certainly when, I don't want to say which decade, but when I was coming up, it was all you knew about was acting, writing and directing. And I'm not even sure I knew what a director was. The rest of it was sort of on the periphery, which all felt a bit strange and different. I mean, I didn't even know about producing back then. I kind of did, but I didn't. So it's been really, I kind of fall into things. I follow my nose. I'm very instinctive. Even when I'm picking projects to work on, it's all about following my nose and my gut instinct. And that's been sort of my guide to how things have kind of happened. So, you know, a short film came along about a desperate woman who breaks into a sperm bank. So I thought, how are we going to raise the money for this? Yeah, you know, we applied for film funds, because we asked people, how do you get stuff made? And we seemed to think that there was a rites of passage in how we did things. So, yeah, we found the script. We decided to raise money for it. We went to Cannes. We asked every man how's his sperm and asked him to donate his sperm and give us the proceeds, and it worked. We raised £60,000. Wow. Now I say that in capital it's probably only about £6,000 or £7,000, but it was enough to pay for catering and insurance and kit and bits and pieces that you had to pay for. But you know, Panavision were fantastic. Hugh Whitaker, who I'm still friends with today, was really supportive, as were Fujifilm. They gave us the stock for free, and Lip Sync did the post on it. And it was a real baptism by fire, but there's no greater way. I mean, I don't think I'd do it again. It was shot in Super 35. We hadn't a clue what we were doing. But, you know, the film has, you know, it was a starting point that kind of led to many other routes. And then I kind of went in, you know, I didn't have friends in the industry, except for those I met through Rocliffe. And I started, you know, working on films, you know, making more short films, and then working as a coordinator and working my way up as a production manager, then a line producer, and then I started producing. In quite a sort of short space of time, I was producing feature films, and then, you know, on each film I would meet somebody else who would say, "Hey, come and do it. You seem to know exactly what you're doing with low budget stuff." And yeah, that's kind of how it began. But one of the big things for me was I felt that there was no kind of guidance. And, you know, I'm very good at asking people to meet me for a coffee and give me their advice. Even now I talk to people, you know, about how they've done stuff. And so that's where the idea for the books came from, was to literally put everything down to share with other people. Because it just felt like a really mystified, elitist kind of space, which I didn't know how to get into. And, you know, it's quite tough, and I think a lot of people will agree on this, or will feel this. It's quite tough to keep asking for favors and knocking on doors and asking how to. You feel like a bit of an idiot for saying you don't know what you're doing, but it's okay to say you don't know what you're doing, because everybody's been the same. You know, very few people, you know, grow up within that kind of knowing what to do,
understanding what the roles are. I mean, maybe we could just concentrate for a moment on producing. Because as you said, I mean, at what stage did you know that you wanted to pursue producing itself?
I'm still working that one out.
Okay, so maybe you could, because you had quite a specific route, but obviously there are lots of different kinds of producers: creative producers, development producers, producers who are bringing in the finance. What were the skills that you know, when you were first making those very low budget short films, what were the skills that you felt you needed to accrue to really kind of make you robust in that position?
I think there are many different types of producer when it comes to, you know, further down the road. And I think you have to try the different routes to it, which is why shorts is so brilliant as our low budget features, because you have to be everything. You even have to be, you know, the person that cleans up at the end of the day and repainting the walls. So there's many different aspects to producing, but particularly at the low budget. And you have to be resourceful. You have to think on your feet. You have to remember that it's okay to, you know, get knockbacks. It's okay to make mistakes, as long as you have some very key things in place, like your insurance, like you can feed people. If you are asking people to do stuff for free, you know, try not to make people feel that they're doing you a favor, when in actual fact they're doing you the favor. But I think you have to look at what it is that you're doing, look at what it is that you bring to the table, and really work hard at remembering that you know, you're more than one film. I think it's the tenacity that you need more than anything else,
and overcoming the kind of limitations, because you're always going to have you're always going to have limitations, even with big budgets.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also that the big thing is about learning to communicate, not being afraid to share your information. And I found that out a bit sort of further down the road. I thought it was like keeping everything to myself, not disturbing people. And actually, it's the complete opposite. I mean, you must find that too, Hannah. You know, as a writer, you have to communicate the ideas on the page and be able to talk about what it is. And I think it's about that communication between a producer and a writer, working out that you're making the same thing together.
Yeah, absolutely. And not being afraid. I spent quite a lot of time, which sounds like it was similar to you, kind of feeling like I had to pretend that I knew it all, I knew everything, I knew every aspect of everything. And actually it's really fine to kind of say, but I don't understand what that is, can you just explain what that is and move on? And how does structure work? Or how, there's all sorts of elements to that.
I did lots of.
How did you connect? How did you say you found, you know, that first, because I'm thinking of the people who might be watching who are wanting to find collaborators, wanting to find product, because it's actually, you know, you knew at that stage you wanted to produce a short film. How do you go about finding a writer? How do you go about finding a good script, whether it's a writer solely and then attaching a director, or a writer-director?
Well, I think first of all, it's about the connections that you make. And I think this is a great time to connect with people. I just wanted to add on as well that one of the best places and best things that I did was I started doing lots of courses, short courses. I did courses at Raindance. I did courses at the Script Factory. Script Factory no longer exists. But I did a lot of courses and read a lot of books about filmmaking just to try and get my head around what this was. And the great thing about courses is that you do meet other people on them. And I think also all the networking events, particularly when there's free drink, which it's great. It's a great sort of leveler and loosener in terms of like going up and meeting people, like screenings, going to festivals. And I mean, obviously we're in very unprecedented times at the moment, so there isn't necessarily the same opportunities to network in person, but there are a lot of sort of webinars and groups and meetups online. And you'll find that there's a lot of writers as well who are looking for producers. So what I say to people is look at the list, look at the lists that are coming through on competitions, who's been long-listed and shortlisted. Look at who got through on film festivals, short film festivals in particular. Look at the credits. Credits are really useful, IMDb. And you can find people on Twitter, on Facebook, on LinkedIn. I'm not a fan of being found on Facebook because I'm being contacted on Facebook because a lot of my family photos are on there, and that's because my family is spread all over the world. I don't want to do a lot of chats on there, but you can reach out to people and create networks. There's a lot of in the script, I think Lucy shares, not Lucy shares, Lucy. She has a Facebook page, I think, called Into the Script.
Lucy V. Hay, yeah.
And I think that's a great place to find different writers. We've got loads of alumni on Rocliffe who are looking for opportunities to get, that first credit, be it a short film, be it a web series. And there's so much opportunity at the moment to make things. BBC Writers' Room runs a lot of kind of courses and competitions. So it's really about digging and, looking around at where people are. And I would say festivals, competitions, and just online chat rooms and sort of groups. There used to be a thing called Script Chat on a Sunday night where a lot of people would tune in and would talk together. Courses are great to meet people as well.
And so do you think, because there's been a lot of discussion at this time, particularly from writers, who are saying they're finding it quite difficult to write, and that the expectation is this should be a wonderful time to be making loads and loads of content, but actually it's really hard not to feel that either you're incredibly stressed or you're interrupted by the news, or it's very hard to concentrate. So I think it'd be quite interesting if we could sort of talk a little bit more about the things that people can do so they feel that they are kind of keeping themselves going and connected within the industry, but that might not actually be the sitting, writing 1,000 words or coming up with a new short film or the first draft of a feature film.
Well, what really fascinated me when I was interviewing writers for the first book was the amount of writers who talk about the fact that they do very little writing, and that's in normal time. They want with a pen in their hand, thinking about their characters, thinking about the characters' backstories, thinking about the characters before the script. The story begins, the film begins, and thinking about what happens to them afterwards, so that they've got a complete arc. And that's something that you can do. You can work out complete biographies in your head by just taking your character for a walk in your head. It is really hard to concentrate. I don't know about anybody else on here, but I've never planted as many freaking seeds in my life. I'm now growing rocket basil leeks and all sorts of things. But, at the same time, I'm thinking about what kind of future it's going to be and what kind of work can I produce. And, a lot of people are thinking about, well, what can you do if this gets extended? I mean, what things may be restricted? What happens if this goes on for quite a while? And I'm like, I want to find things that don't have that many characters that, are chamber pieces. So think about ideas. You can always pitch somebody an idea that's 25 words. I mean, I said in before that, on other webinars that I've done and talks, there's no harm in reaching out to somebody, producers or directors, and asking them for, 15-minute coffee and a chat on in a Zoom room, because that means they're not actually giving you any of their personal details, and just having a chat with people. I think that's perfectly reasonable, because they can say no or they cannot contact you, but some will reach out to you. And I know that, I've said to other people that there's a lot of actors out there who you can find, who a lot of people are on social media at the moment. It seems to have had a big resurgence. Do a table read of a script that you've got. Get some actor friends or writer friends online and set up a Zoom room. Send them all a PDF of the script, and then ask them to mark an X and tell you afterwards, not before, where they get confused or bored, or where does their mind drift, and then ask questions like, whose story is it, what genre is it, what worked for them, what didn't, and really just don't interrupt them during the read through, but just do something like that, and that can be a real kind of boost to your sort of your creative juices, so to speak.
And there's also so much, like you were saying, there's so much content in terms of these kind of talks. The very fact of anybody tuning into this now, that is part of your work and a part of your research. And I mean, one thing that I think